that's an issue, well, don't participate. I had someone on one of my classes and he did not like the fact that I posted it on the internet. Pre-recorded it.
You're in the wrong business.
Yeah, I guess. All right, so if you're online, you should be able to see my screen. If you're in the class, it should be on the TVs. All right, guys, if you don't know me, my name is Will Story. I'm the loud one that you guys hear in the office making phone calls obnoxiously, right? I'll tell you guys this. If you're on virtually, if you have a question, unmute yourself. If you're here in the class, you have a question, just raise your hand. I will stop pretty quick. Don't hold it till the end, because we do that. We're not in that section anymore and it looks weird. If you're on virtually, please keep yourself muted. Otherwise, I've heard some weird stuff. I don't want to know what your Starbucks order is. And I don't want to hear you yelling at your kid. So please mute yourself. Would anyone mind shutting that door for me, please? If you don't have it, I would recommend coming to these classes, guys, with a printed out contract. So you can write all over it. I mean, that's how mine is. I just write notes all over this freaking thing, right? That's up to you. I have some good news about this contract. It does not change on January 1. A lot of the contract to buy and sell changes substantially, guys, substantially. So I will tell you this, I'm going to teach here on December 10th. There'll be a 3-hour class on it, all the new changes. I highly recommend you put that in your calendar. It'll be 9 a.m. December 10th. There are other places to take it, but guys, competency, we are required to be competent. That's part of our job by the Real Estate Commission. So with that in mind, if you don't know about the new changes, like for example, here's the big, well, one of the big ones, right? Loan termination is only if you don't get the loan, right? So what if you don't realize that and you tell your buyer, don't worry, if you don't like it, you can always just kill it over the loan. That doesn't exist after January 1. There's nothing about the buyer's sole discretion on the loan anymore. At that point, there's purely, did you get the loan or did you not get the loan, right? There's a lot of other huge changes, and if you're not aware of them, get ready to get sued. So I would definitely know them.
Do they have that the loan didn't?
Oh yeah, they'll have to prove that the loan did not go through.
Should have to. So what if they don't give them I know this is wrong class, but what if they don't give them the documentation in time?
Then you're not moving forward in good faith. We're keeping your earnest money.
That was my thought.
Now, what if I stupidly go buy a car and take my credit? I'm gonna mess up my DTI. I could get out. So there are ways that I could get out, right? I could go take my credit. I go buy a car, mess up my DTI. But that means I'm not buying any house at that point, right? So do you really want to go that route? You know, so you're gonna be pretty locked in, and it's not like, I'll say Colorado's been the exception. Nationwide, that's pretty much how it goes. And I'm so damn happy we're going that way. So that's one of many changes. There's huge changes around like lease stuff, like solar panels. I've dealt with solar panels a ton, guys. There's some huge changes there. So be in that class. That's not today's class, but December 10th, 9 to 12, right here. You can sign up on Cox Education's website. It's $30 and it'll be 3 CEs. So if you don't have your CEs, make sure you're doing that. But like I said, we'll go through this. You all have questions, stop me at any time.
December 10th.
December 10th, right here, 9 to 12. And I am going to do it hybrid, so it'll be online and in person on that day here. But yeah, it's definitely a really important class. I sat in on a 2-hour presentation on Monday, and it's substantial changes. So, all right, guys, so I'm going to start at the top. I'm going to go through this rather quickly, and then if y'all want at the end, I'll go through it a second time the way I present it to my sellers, because I can tell you, I always ask them, I say, do you want me to read it word for word or paraphrase? And everyone has always said paraphrase. So when I paraphrase this contract, it takes me about 5 minutes. So going through it, guys, you need to have what your brokerage is up on there, right? If your brokerage is not up there, if you tick off the public, they cannot come after you. So they need to always know who you are. Now, keep in mind, a team name doesn't work. It can't just be like Her Group Colorado, right? It actually has to be Keller Williams Realty Downtown LLC. That is important. The entire name is important. So if your contract doesn't have a header like that, you need to reach out to CTM and figure out how to get it on there. Okay? What question do you got, Jen?
Yeah,
I don't.
This is what I'm getting in mind.
I don't believe you have to have the actual address, but it does have to be Keller Williams Realty Downtown LLC. You have to have that on there, you know? I mean, that's all of your marketing. That's everything. They have to be able to find you. That's how they find you. And just so you guys know, if you do have a team or a team name, say you call yourself Williams Story Team, right? Williams Story Team works. William Real Estate does not, or William Real Estate Group. I see that way too many times. So be careful on your naming of your team. Going on down, guys, this first box, I love it. First off, it tells us this is an approved form, right? We're not really supposed to deal with unapproved forms, right? Like builder contracts, we can't really advise on those. When it says mandatory, that's when you have to start using this contract. So this was mandatory as of January of 2020. But this contract will not change this next year. I love how they put in big capital bold letters. This means to read it, right? So your seller should know this is a big deal. We're signing a contract, right? It's a legally binding contract. The next section here is saying that compensation is not charged by law. So I've heard someone say before on the phone, I was in this office, they're talking to their buyer. They said, well, hey, I have an admin fee of $500. It's required by law. That's a lie. Don't ever lie about your commission because they tell the client right there that it's not charged by law. Next thing, talks about the two different relationships we can have. Now tell me, what's the difference between a seller agent and a transaction broker? Who wants to go?
Transaction broker, you can represent both of them?
You can, that is a true statement. But what's the other difference?
You're not an advocate for any.
You work with them as a.
You're not an advocate as a transaction broker. What were you saying? Advocate, what were you saying?
You work with them as a customer.
Not necessarily. You can be a transaction broker. So we default to everybody as a transaction broker.
A referee?
So actually, that's what I have on here. Mine says coach referee, right? That's exactly how I look at it in layman's terms, coach versus referee, right? So as a seller's agent, I'm your coach. I'm in your corner. I'm fighting for you. As a transaction broker, I can tell you yes, no, right, wrong, but I can advise, counsel, or negotiate for you. That's true as well with the buyer agency. And section 6 will drill into this further, but it's coach referee, right? Or I also like to call it lawyer versus judge, right? Because the judge is right, wrong, yes, no, it's not advice, right? Go ask the judge in traffic court for advice, they won't give it to you. So that's how I look at that. I can tell you, I've never, ever represented a seller as a transaction broker unless a buyer of mine wanted to buy the house, right? And section 4 will delve into that a little bit deeper as well. So this right here, we're gonna start defining different things, right? So an agreement, that's what this is. This is an agreement. It's between the broker, us, but it's not really between us, right? It's really between the seller and Keller Williams Realty Downtown. That's the reality, right? So we don't do it. It says on here that we are doing this on behalf of the brokerage firm. So when we're signing these documents, keep in mind, if you're messing something up, you're not only potentially hurting yourself, you're potentially hurting the brokerage and the brokerage's insurance policy. That impacts all of us. So please do your contracts right, because if there's a claim on the brokerage, it hurts all of us. All right, are we a multi-person firm or a one-person, guys? We are a multi-person. One person would be if I said, I'm done with Keller Williams, I'm leaving tomorrow, I'm starting Real Story Real Estate. It's gonna just be me and only me. Now, if my wife got licensed, we can no longer be a one-person firm, right? Now we're gonna define the who, right? Who's the seller? The seller's class 1 template, right? Who's the brokerage firm? Keller Williams Realty Downtown LLC. Make sure that doesn't say in yours Keller Williams Realty or Keller Williams or KW. You need that full name to define who it is. The broker, your name, right? If you have a team, that's not your team name, that is you, right? Going on down, then we're gonna describe what the property is, right? So there's two ways of describing property, right? One, we do it with a mailing address, and the other, we do it with a legal description. You guys realize mailing addresses have no impact on life. What's up, Jen?
Right now, you have like our code, because you have to like approve all of our contracts.
Mhm.
You're not good for a code lister.
No, not necessarily. I mean, does she co-list all of your contracts? No, so, no, I mean,
Okay.
I can take as this, I'm a supervisory broker for the office. I get calls on Saturdays and Sundays. People call and say, hey, Will, can you help me write an offer? And I help them write an offer. I don't co-list. I don't make any money off that offer, you know? But keep in mind, guys, the legal description is what really matters here. If you go to Realist is not always 100%. If you want the best legal description, you go to the county assessor's office. But the mailing address isn't really immaterial. We transfer title based on legal descriptions, right? That's how it really happens. Going on down, guys, if it's affordable housing, did anyone hear about the debacle that happened at Green Valley Ranch? It really came out about 3-4 years ago. No, so Green Valley Ranch, all these houses, they were affordable housing, but it never got recorded. So people were selling them later at a premium that you weren't able to do because it was affordable housing, right? So right here, when you're with your seller, you say, once you know it's not, which most areas are not affordable housing, but if you're in Green Valley Ranch or somewhere, you're like, man, they bought it for so cheap. You're like, how do these numbers make sense? Ask them, was this affordable housing when you bought it? Because if it is, it needs to stay in that program usually. That can't just come out. And look more into the affordable housing program if you get one of those, right? 3.6 says, hey, we're gonna do a lease, right? So we can do this with this contract. It could be selling or it's leasing, right? It's not one or the other. So we're doing a listing contract where we can lease the property is what it's saying here, right? The listing period, oops, sorry. The listing period, you guys, you can put whatever you want in here. I generally put a year. It's up to you what you want to put in there. It's your business. Practice it the way you like, and go that way. Now going on down to here, section 4. This is a big deal, okay? And what I mean by that is in section 4 says a few things, right? Section 4.2 says that we can have an in-company transaction, right, with different brokers. That'd be like if I'm gonna sell my listing to Jen. If that was gonna happen, then that'd be in-company. We're both Keller Williams, we're different brokers. In that sense, I can still be seller's agent, she can be buyer's agent, no big deal. But if you go to 4.3, it says in-company transaction, one broker. So that'd be like, I'm selling a house, I find the buyer, I'm one person. Now, if you're on a team, to clarify on that, you're all the same broker, essentially. So with that in mind, you know, be careful when you say you're on a team or there's a team, because at that point in time, you're one broker, essentially. So if someone on my team finds a buyer, you have to treat it as in-company, one broker. And what that means, and this is where section 3 is really fun, is you have a few options. I can be just a seller's agent, right? And if you check section 4.3.1.2, I'm only gonna be the seller's agent, right? There's no option. I've locked myself into it. Don't ever, 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 ever check that box, ever. You say this happens, right? I've got this listing, and one of my buyers I've been working with for a while, he's on the internet. He's like, ooh, they call me up about that. Like, Will, I like 123 Fake Street. I'm like, awesome, I'm the listing agent on that. Well, if I already have buyer agency with them, I already have relationship with them, I cannot say, hey, seller, I've only checked seller agency only. So which deal do I refer out? I have buyer agency, I can only be seller agent here. Which client do you refer out? Do you guys know? The buyer? Yeah, the buyer and the seller, actually, because you can't do both. You can't do either one at that point, because you said I'm only gonna be a seller's agent. With this buyer, you can't just say, well, hey, buyer, sorry, you gotta go get another agent. I'm gonna work with the seller, right? Because you know stuff about that buyer. You know their motivations. You know too much to then step away and refer just them. So at that point, you get to refer both out. So instead of making a good commission, you're making 2 small commissions, right? So I would never, ever, ever, ever check 4.3.1.2 ever. It boxes you in. So keep that in mind. Now, if somebody comes to your open house, right? Somebody you don't know, right? You're the seller's agent. So we talked about the word customer, right? Someone comes to my open house and they're like, oh, I love the house. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I can help you write an offer and I'll transaction broker the whole thing. That is not okay. Because keep this in mind, before you met that person from the open house you didn't know anything about, you have an elevated relationship, an elevated duty to your seller. So John comes off the street, you have no relationship with them. How is it okay to take them from a status of I don't know you to transaction broker and your seller down to transaction broker? That's not okay. Now I'm closing a house next week. I knew the seller, I didn't know the buyer. So what is it? I'm seller's agent. The buyer, they are a customer. I have no duties to them. So that's what I would say. If someone comes into one of your listings, you get a sign call and they want to buy your listing, you remain seller's agent and they're a customer. The only time you go from seller's agent into the transaction broker role is buyer that comes up, you have relationship with them. That's it, right? So maybe it's like, you know, this is the internet lead. I've been working for a while. We met, we did a buyer consultation. They like my listing. I have to become that transaction broker because I had 2 people in elevated statuses. I'm going to de-elevate them both to transaction broker. That's fine. But don't pull someone up and match it to an elevated status. What do you got, Jen?
If you have someone unlocked for an open house that's unrepresented and you're with the seller already, do you recommend they get an agent or do you just get the whole commission?
I mean, you do it however you want. I can tell you, I'm taking the whole commission on mine. So you do it however you want. But I mean, I can take my commission also says that if I find the buyer, I go from 6% to 4%. Right? So I do discount at that point, but that's up to you how you want to run your business. But I don't refer that customer out to somebody else. I know another agent that recently actually referred me a deal because she goes, I don't feel comfortable being in the middle and having that customer. I said, hey, look, you refer the customer to me, we'll write the offer and I'll give you 50% of the commission. So I didn't have to go out and run around and do anything. So if you don't want to have a customer and the seller and have that weird, because it is weird place to be, because the customer's gonna ask you stuff, right? They're gonna ask your opinion, and you just have to tell them, I can't do it, I can't do it. If you don't want to be in that awkward position, call your friend up, go, hey, I got someone wants to write an offer right now on my listing. You don't have to drive them around and do anything. You just have to write the offer and take it to the finish line on a 50% referral. You can do that, right? Why not do that? So that's a way of doing it and doing it safely, because I will be real, when they're in the middle of both sides like that, it's higher liability. If something goes wrong, you know, they're gonna say, well, what happened? You know, versus if you have two agents, I feel like it does reduce your liability. So that's why someone referred one to me not that long ago, and we wrote an offer on the house. And it was with that agreement of a higher referral fee.
So if you were working the seller and open house and wants it, then you would be treating that buyer potentially as a customer. We don't sign the agreements with them at all.
You give them a broker's disclosure to buyer. It says that they're a customer and you can prepare and convey offers. That's it. Yeah. Yeah, Brenda. I know this is a fun section.
Yeah. So what if you have a seller and the seller's looking for a house or condo and you can't find anything in there for a month? What do you do with that?
They what?
What do you do with that? Like if you go door knocking to see someone.
So I have a buyer that wants to find a new house. Okay.
That is selling.
Yep.
But she also wants to.
So she's also a buyer
Uh-huh,
and she wants to buy a house in the neighborhood where you can't find one. So you door knock
uh-huh,
and you find someone who wants to sell.
uh-huh.
Then you're the buyer's agent and the seller's a customer.
Okay,
They're a FSBO right now, unless they have an agent.
okay.
Right, so it's like buying a house from a FSBO at that.
So at that point, you're gonna either have to ask the buyer for commission or ask the seller.
Or do a commission agreement with the seller.
Can you do half, like seller pays half of it and buyer pays half?
Everything is negotiable in life. I mean, if you look at the buyer agency, it says that only buyer can pay is one of the options for commission. You can check that one. I don't know who does. But there's something that in there that says only buyer can pay. So you can do it however you want.
Seller pays, buyer obligated.
No, there's a third one that's only buyer can pay.
Okay.
I don't know why that box exists, but it does exist. It's like, why would you only want the buyer to be able to pay? But you know, you can negotiate that commission however.
I feel like physical.
Yep, for FSBOs.
Yeah.
But here's the hard thing. I don't want to go too deep down to this rabbit hole. We have a buyer agency class next month. But if I don't check that my buyer owes me a commission at all, if I say I get whatever I'm offered from the other side, and I take my buyer to a FSBO, and the FSBO says, I'm gonna give you $2, I have to take it at that point. So we can talk about section 7 of the buyer agency next month.
Okay.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Awesome. So guys, like I said, don't ever check 4.3.1.2. If someone comes in, you know, they should be a customer unless you have that previous relationship. If not, then you can become the transaction broker. What do you got, Jeff?
Before you jump into 5,
Mhm.
can you just go back to 3.3.9?
Yeah, we'll go about it.
So we've got a 3.9.2 and we've got a will not. Can we just kind of walk through that really fast?
Yeah, so let's say my contract expires on Christmas Day. It'll go to the next business day, right? Let's say I have a deadline of this Saturday. Well, if my deadline's this Saturday, you know what that really means? It really means Tuesday, because Monday's a federal holiday, right? So with that in mind, I usually check Wilby, because I don't know all the holidays, and there's new holidays.
Not will.
Yeah, and I'm not so worried about on this one, you know, because it's just the expiration. I don't ever get to the expiration of the contract with the client. I want to get it done, right? So I don't really worry about it here. I worry more about having the contract to buy and sell. But you know, a lot of times I check will on contract to buy and sell. I'll put my acceptance deadline on a Saturday, and it technically means it's Monday, but people still look at it as Saturday. Does that get you on section 3? Cool. You guys, section 5. So these are the duties. They're called the uniform duties, right? And as a transaction broker or a seller's agent, I must do all of this, right? So be familiar with what these mean. Like, can I disclose the seller to seller adverse material facts that I know about a buyer? Can I do it? Can I not? Should I do it? Should I not? You know, do I have to lie? Do I have to disclose stuff? Can I disclose whether my seller will agree to finance terms other than those offered? Like, you guys ever talk to a listing agent and the house is like super overpriced and they're like, just send me the lower offer. It's cool. They'll take it. I've had listing agents tell me that. Well, it's very clear that I must not disclose that the seller is going to take other terms than those offered, right? But I've had listing agents literally tell me on the phone, hey, it's been on the market for 3 months. just send the offer at 600 and we'll get it done. And you're like, really? Okay. So people do violate this all the time, but be aware of what these are. So if you're not familiar, I'm not going to read you section 5, but please read it to yourself, right? And be aware. And it's really for anybody out there because you default to a transaction broker if you don't have a contract. So it's anyone in the public, right? So be aware of what these are, because even if you're doing an open house, that's how that works. They are members of the public and you're a transaction broker by default. Now, 5.8, there's different philosophies on this. When I'm asked as a listing agent, will I or will I not disclose to buyers and other people whether we have offers? And I know some people say they will not, and some people say they will. So it's up to you how you want to do your business. I think there's pros and cons to both, but you have to decide which way do you check that box. Now, I do believe that when I can disclose that I have an offer, I can use it to play against other offers and get higher offers. So I personally do disclose, and I check the box will, but decide how you want to do your business.
What do you mean disclose? You mean just disclose you have offers, or mean not? Or does that mean disclosing prices, terms?
Oh, it's whatever your client's fine with. And this says the existence of offers, right?
Yeah.
And whether the offers were obtained. I mean, I believe that we can disclose whatever we want as it doesn't hurt our client. You know, I mean, like a stigmatized fact, for example, you can't disclose that without your client's permission. I usually tell my clients, we should disclose it because they'll figure it out, right? Now, you guys, section 6, this is like the big section. And it almost reads identical in buyer agency. People think all the time, like, well, I can advise the seller, right? My buddy's going to put his house on the market in March. We'll sign the agreement in March. Is your buddy going to call you between now and March and ask you for advice? Probably, right? So let's just say, hey, buddy, I want to get to work for you. I know you're going to call me a lot between now and March. Why don't we go ahead and sign the listing agreement so that I can help promote your interests? And if you have any questions, I can counsel you, right? That's what it says. I can promote your interest to the utmost good faith, loyalty, and fidelity. And then 6.3 is that you can counsel. So when people without a listing agreement are counseling people, they're acting outside of the scope of what they're able to do. The other thing is 6.2, you can seek a price and terms, AKA negotiate for your client. So without seller agency, you can't do any of these things, not legally. So just keep that in mind. And if you're like, how do I get the listing signed now, not in 3 months? Before the end, hopefully you don't meet somebody over those 3 months and they take the listing instead. Here's how you do it. You say what the value of the listing agreement is. Hey, I know you're gonna want my counsel and advice in the next 3 months we get the house ready. I can't do it without this agreement. So that's up to you how you do it, but that's how I would do it. Section 7, big deal, guys. I don't know about y'all, but I like to get paid for my efforts. So with that in mind, here's the big thing. Section 7.1 talks about sales commission. 7.1.2 talks about lease commission. They're very similar, right? So right where this number 1 is here, that's where you're gonna put your percentage, whatever you decide that percentage is for you. Now, what gets really confusing to sellers sometimes is then down here, it'll say, let's just say, the standard commission, right? It'll say that for the buyer's agent, then you put it for the transaction broker too. And then they're like, wait, so you've got 6% for the sales commission, then you got 2.8 for the buyer's commission and 2.8 for the transaction broker commission. Is that like 11.6? Is that what you're charging me? I mean, I've had people call me on the phone and they missed your story. This is not what you said. So every time I'm with the seller, I point this section out. I make sure they know, I go, my commission's this. And I say, if you look at it, it says out of our commission, we'll pay the other firm this. And they can come as one of 2 forms, a transaction broker or a buyer's agent. But the only number that you're paying is that 1 by the 1 right there. You're not paying the other numbers. That comes out of my total commission.
So I've seen like different amounts offered for broker versus transaction broker. I mean, versus transaction broker.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure why.
I don't know why people do that. I think it's because they don't understand the contract very well. They probably put in there, because I've seen that too, where they say for a buyer's agent, I'll pay 2.8, but a transaction broker, I'll only pay 2, right? I've seen that before. And a lot of times when they do it, I think their thought is, well, if I find the buyer, I'm going to reduce my commission. So they're putting what they would reduce their commission to, I think is what it is, but they're doing it incorrectly.
Aren't there companies where everyone is only a transaction broker?
I've heard there are, I don't know of one, but I know, what? I mean, I don't know. So I know a guy that thinks that, I know one agent that thinks it's best to always be a transaction broker. He thinks that it limits his liability. I don't think it does it anyway. I think he still gets sued. And I don't understand how you can do your job as a transaction broker because you can't counsel, you can't advise, and you can't negotiate. So I don't understand it. But I don't know. There are people that do that. I don't understand why. But either way, if they come as a transaction broker, you pay them X%. If You come as a buyer's agent, you pay them Y%. You can do different amounts. I don't know why people do. I personally don't. I put the same amount each time. Now, the same thing would apply to lease commission. You would say, hey, this is how I get paid, and this is what we're gonna offer, right? And normally with leases, we also see, may not be a percentage, it might be a dollar amount, so you can put the dollar amount over there as well. Now, a note on leases, I bet almost everyone in this room and probably online too, have signed a lease. I know I've signed a few leases in my life, right? But how many people are actually competent to do leasing? I don't know. You have to make that decision. Are you competent in it or not? Because the last thing you want to do is have things go sideways. The real estate commission say, why were you competent to do this? Because if your answer is, I don't know, you're gonna get spanked really hard. So if you're doing leases, make sure you know what you're doing. Otherwise, you can be in a bad spot, you know? Yes.
So when you put 6% and you can split it however way, so do you pay 2.8 or 2.5 and you get the rest, or
What do you mean?
like,
So if it said 6%, I put 2.8, yeah, the rest goes to the list.
and they can do that?
But I mean, that's what it's here. It says the total commission is X%. Out of this X%, I'm gonna pay Y to the other side.
And usually 6% is standard.
I can tell you this, in classes, I'm not supposed to talk percentages because of antitrust violations. So with that in mind, I mean, you can put whatever you want, but here's the total commission. Out of the total commission, the buyer's agent gets this amount, so the rest goes to you. So if there isn't a buyer's agent, for example, like somebody said, I can't remember, someone was like, you know, what happens if I do both ends? Well, technically, there is no buyer's agent to pay, so you do get all of the sales commission at that time. Now, whether you lower it or not, that's up to you. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
No worries. So 7.2 is really interesting, right? When do we actually make our commission, right? When does that happen, right? So there's a few things, right? One, if the house is sold, there you go, and it's any sale of the property within the listing period by the seller, by the broker, or by any other person. I met with a seller the other day. He didn't like his agent. He had fired him, but they still had a listing agreement in place, right? He goes, I'm gonna go FSBO and I'm gonna sell it on my own. I said, cool, you can go FSBO all day long. However, that agent, they still have a right to the commission if you sell it on your own. He's like, no way. And I showed him this in the contract. He goes, oh. So if you're in if someone says, screw you, I'm not gonna work with you anymore, I'm gonna go sell it on my own. They sell it, you've still earned a commission, right? 7.2.2 says that you also, when you find a buyer that's ready, able, and willing, right? That's when you earn your commission. So if you have a seller and you said, hey, I've got a ready, able, and willing buyer, and they choose not to move forward, technically you could sue your client for commission if they weren't willing to pay it at that point in time. Now, I will tell you this, if it's when you have an offer and it's a ready, able, willing buyer, it may not stand up in court because they're gonna say, how do you know they were gonna make it to the finish line? But if it's the day of closing and the seller says, I'm not gonna sell, ready, able, willing, it's pretty obvious at that point, right? So that's another way of showing it, right? 7.2.3 talks about holdover period. So it says any sale of the property within X calendar days, right? You can put whatever you want there. I see 90 a lot of times. To anyone that I've negotiated with, so some buyer that came in, I negotiate directly with the buyer or their agent. And so we kill the listing agreement. I'm no longer working with them. I have to send out a list of names. So, hey, I talked to John Smith. I talked to whoever else. These are the ones, if you go under contract with them inside of that time period that we discussed, then you will or you will not owe me a commission. That's what the holdover period is there. Again, it's gonna be a pain to get the money. You're gonna have to probably go to court. You guys have to decide for yourself if suing over commission is the way you wanna make your money or not. So 7.3 talks about when it's applicable and
Can we
payable.
talk about whether or not we do will or will not on that?
I mean, if you want to be able to tell your seller like, hey, so like I have a provision in my contract that says you can fire me at any time. So if I bring a buyer to the house and then they fire me and they go to that buyer and they're like, hey, look, my agent's gone. So now we can do it at a different price or whatever. And they do it without me. I can call them up and say, hey, it's awesome that you're working with that buyer. But since it says will in there, you will owe me the commission no matter what, even though you fired me.
So is common practice in this office to put will?
I would put will, because that way you can enforce the holdover. If you don't put will, you cannot enforce the holdover.
And then those class.
I put 90 usually. You know, I think if you put 900, a judge would throw it out because they'd say that's an absurd amount of time. That's almost 3 years. You know, but I think 90 days is fair. And the reality is if I bring a buyer to someone's house, they fire me, that buyer's not gonna be there in 90 days, right? I mean, it's like now or they're gone, they're under contract on their house probably, right? So when applicable and payable, the commission obligation applies to stalemate during the listing period, right? Or any extension, right? And it's payable for these different reasons. So even if the seller, there's no closing due to the seller not closing, it's still required. So keep that in mind. You can push for your commission if you need to. Limitation on third-party compensation. Do you guys know at the end of the day, if you're getting money, like let's just say that I own a home and for a seller, it'd be like, say I own a title company. I'm like, Mr. Seller, let's use this title company. I get some compensation off of it. Well, I need to disclose that because Section 8 says if there is any that they have to know about it, right? And I have to disclose it to them. So keep in mind that they have to consent to you making money off of products. So if you're like, hey, I own this roofing company, they'll fix your roof on after it was bad on the inspection. You need to disclose to them that you own part of that and make sure that they're okay. Because it says they have to sign separate written consent that it's okay for you to make money off that company. A lot of people do what's called an affiliated business arrangement, an ABA, right? Going on down
That happens?
all the time.
Okay.
All the time. I mean, all the time. I don't know if you guys have worked with Remax Pros. They send out a lot of ABAs. I just did the old EXP. They send out a lot of ABAs. It just depends.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you have your own mortgage company, stuff like that, absolutely, you have to disclose. Going on down to here, we're gonna use multiple listing service, right? So keep in mind, we're just telling them here, we're gonna use multiple listing service. So your house is gonna be out there on the internet. Number 9 talks about exactly how we can access and market their house, right? So it's saying that the property will be submitted to one or more MLSs and the property information will also be sent out. So with that in mind, we're telling them right up front, we're gonna put your house on the internet. We're gonna get it all over the place, right? So I would check will for 9.1 on each of those because it's just saying this is what we are gonna do with it. Now, also the seller authorizes all these electronic and other marketing except I've had a seller that said, Will, I don't want my house on Craigslist. I don't like it. It's sketchy and they're scams. Cool. We wrote Craigslist in there, right? So whatever it may be. Also, you're gonna say whether the property address and the listing can be displayed on the internet. Some people do not want their address on the internet. It's very far and few between. We're usually talking about higher end luxury houses or something like that. Property access, this talks about how we can get in. You're gonna use an electronic lockbox. That's like the, I'm blanking on the name. I don't know if anyone can help me. Super lock boxes, like one of those, right? With the little panels on them. Or we can use the manual lockbox, right? Whichever one you're gonna use, check that there because that gives you the ability to do it. Or maybe you have other instructions. Maybe they have a key panel on the door, right? You know, those doors have the key panels. It just depends on what that looks like. Or I sold a condo downtown. When you went there, you had to go to the front desk, get a key and go there. So that's where your other instructions would go for that. 9.2.2. Y'all, if you leave this blank, how can you have actively licensed real estate agents come in there? You cannot. So you have to decide what you do here, which boxes you check. And it's not really your decision. It's really you to be there to educate your client so they can make the right decision. For example, are they cool letting unlicensed broker assistants into their house? Maybe, maybe not. I mean, I don't usually recommend that because they haven't been through background checks. You just tell them like, hey, for showings, we're probably gonna have to let the first one go, right? Because we're gonna have licensed agents in here for it to work. Now, if you're doing like a high-end place and they're like, Mr. Story, I want you there for every showing, I may not be able to give that lockbox to other agents, right? Because they want me there every time, right? With licensed appraisers, the issue there would be, again, will they let them in or not? Licensed appraisers have gone through a background check, so maybe they're cool with it, maybe they're not. Unlicensed inspectors, they don't go through a background check. Are they cool with it or not, right? So keep in mind, you gotta tell them, here's all the options. And then other, what are you gonna put there? I can tell you my other box says my assistant, it says my stager, it says my photographer, so I can give those lock boxes out. So what you choose to do in other, that's up to you. All right, right here, 9.3.1, it says the following tasks will be performed, right? The following marketing. So you can outline all of it and have this long paragraph of all the marketing you do. Mine simply says outline in marketing booklet or something like that, because I give them a marketing booklet of all the stuff I'll do. And then the seller authorizes the video and picture of the interior, except this, right? So if someone says, I don't want my kid's bedroom on the internet, it's people that say that. That's where that would go, is right there. Whatever they don't want on camera, right? Now, marketing termination. Do you guys understand that at the end of the day, if they fire you, good luck getting off the internet, right? good luck. And I've had people call me like, get my photos off the internet. I'm like, I can't control the internet. It's huge, right? So with that in mind, this is just a disclosure. It says, hey, we may try to do it, but we can't necessarily do it. So there's no liability to us. If your house is on the internet, I can't get it off. It's not my problem, right? Going on down to here, I love this, section 10. This is where the seller has obligations to do, right? Has anyone ever had that seller that somehow got in touch with the buyer's agent or the buyer directly? Oh my God, it's like the worst thing ever. Well, they're not supposed to negotiate or communicate, right? Directly with the other side. It's supposed to go through us, the broker. So you can let it go if you want. Like I had this deal where these people were selling to their friends and their friends were the customer. And I was representing the seller as a listing agent. And with that in mind, they talked to them all the time and there's all sorts of side negotiations that happened. It was what it was, right? But I could have said, hey, you're not allowed to do that, right? Also, I've had sellers that say, hey, I'm gonna help advertise the house for you, Mr. Story. I'm like, awesome. And sometimes it's good. They share your post on Facebook and it's good. I've also had where it's not good. You get the, hey, you don't want to do that. So this is saying that any advertising, we actually get to approve it, right? Not just the seller, but we're gonna approve it. Section 10, I love this. You're saying, are you a part of a listing agreement or not? Because if they are, there could be an issue with commission if you guys close, right? You can't have two agents signed on. It's the exclusive right to sell, right? Not the anyone can sell this house contract. Now, the second part in that is going to ask, have you received a list of submitted prospects, right? So if you're like me and you take expired listings, this is a big deal because if they expired, maybe they have gotten that submitted list. Maybe they haven't. So section 10 is where you flush that. And I just ask them, have you or have you not gotten these things, right? 10.4, this is saying that anything that I give you, like I give you photos, I give you renderings, I give you blueprints of my house, that I legally have the ability to do that, right? I can tell you I've sold many houses. It was like a new build. And it's like 4 years later, the seller's outgrown the house and they want to sell the house. With that in mind, they have like those like blueprints, all this stuff from the builder from when they bought the house. They have the right to those things, but most builders say you don't have the right to market with those. So if you have builder stuff from your client, before you put it on MLS, even though the seller's saying, I represent that you can do this, I still call the builder because I've had a builder call me and said, hey, you don't have the right to have that on your listing. So with that in mind, even though they gave it to the seller doesn't have the right to use it that way. So if you have someone that says, oh, this is from my builder, I bought it 4 years ago, you should throw this up there. It sounds awesome, but it's not necessarily. If you want a floor plan, Virtuance will do floor plans for you, right? A lot of photography companies will. So just keep that in mind. Now, section 10.5, Colorado Foreclosure Protection Act. Who here's ever done a foreclosure? Yeah, they don't really exist right now, do they? I mean, if someone's getting foreclosed on, they really messed up because the equity position should be pretty good. So just keep this in mind. I don't see foreclosures on the horizon because even if the economy does go down, people's equity positions are pretty high. But the Colorado Foreclosure Protection Act applies if the property is residential, right? It's not like an investment property that I own. The seller resides in the property as my principal residence, right? Also, the buyer's purpose of the property is to use as a personal residence, not that the buyer's buying it as an investment. The property is in foreclosure, right? Or the buyer has noticed that any loan secured by the property is at least 30 days delinquent. So if your sellers are behind, this could apply, right? So keep in mind, get familiar with it. I don't think it's something you're going to see a lot of in the near future. Forbearance, closure, not forbearance. It's a house in forbearance, that's fine.
My point being is there's a cliff with forbearance right now, which housing. So how's that going? Maybe it's a different room, a different conversation.
Do I think forbearance is going to turn to foreclosure? No, because people are going to sell their houses before they go through foreclosure. Foreclosure takes like 18 months. If I can't sell my house in 18 months in this market, I'm really screwed. The reason we had so many foreclosures in 08 is people didn't have the equity and then they couldn't sell their house in the time period necessary, right? Price and terms, guys. A lot of times they're going to listing appointments and I have an idea. Your house is worth like 450 to 500, but I don't know until I see if it's nice or gross, right? I just don't know. So I may go to the listing appointment and my price is TBD, to be determined, right? With that in mind, if that's how you sign the listing agreement, make sure you do a list amend with broker before you hit the market, putting that in, because this agreement that we have says if I bring you all these price and terms, right, I get paid. right? But if the price is TBD, how can I ever enforce that? I really cannot. So keep that in mind that when you have a contract and you leave blanks in it, it leaves it to where you may not be able to get paid. I did that years ago. I had someone's house. It was TBD. I left it like that. I brought them a buyer. It was like, I don't know, like 580 or something, right? And they're like, no, we're just gonna wait till the spring. So we withdrew it from the market. And when it was withdrawn through the winter, they sold it to that exact buyer for 580. But since I had TBD in my price, I had no right to go sue them for commission. So keep that in mind, right? So if you're sloppy with your contract, as I was when I did that, that's how that can work. So make sure you amend, extend, list amend, extend on that. Now terms, cash, conventional, FHA, other might be USDA, you know, it might also be seller financing, something like that. So keep that in mind. There's different terms.
Do you
Now-
write that into 11.1? Do you write list and then extend with broker?
No, mine says TBD usually when I go to the house. And then there's a thing called a list amend with broker.
Right.
So before we go to market, any terms that were TBD get turned into real terms.
Got it. So that's an action item for you.
It's an action item, and it's for my assistant. I tell my assistant, I say, hey, you need to connect the contract before we go to market.
Got it.
And she goes through and fixes every TBD to a real term. You guys, I'll tell you this, when it comes to cash, conventional, FHA, and VA, I generally check all boxes. I have seen houses, I'm like, there's no way it's gonna go FHA, and it does. So keep in mind, I just tell my client like, hey, if we get FHA, this whatever could be an issue. And if they're like, that's fine. If that's the hold up of the sale and the price is right, I'll fix this issue. Cool. Now there are those houses you walk in, like, absolutely no way, you know, and so you can limit it, but I generally don't limit it unless it's really that bad. Now, if it's a condo, make sure it's FHA approved, right? The last thing you wanna do is have all these buyers agents running around. I don't know about you guys, I hate showing a place, a buyer gets all excited about it, and we find out, oh, the agent was wrong, it's not FHA approved, we just wasted everybody's time. So at least you guys respect each other enough to go and look it up and do your job as a listing agent and make sure it's actually approved for that kind of financing if it's a condo.
Also with the VA, right?
VA as well, VA is not as big of an issue as FHA. FHA, left and right, those have expired, those approvals like left and right. The reason they expired is back when people couldn't sell houses, they go to their HOA and like, you better keep the FHA approval on there because that gives us more buyers. The last 2 or 3 years, people are like, I don't care because there's so many conventional buyers, I don't give a rip. But if the market slows down, they're gonna go back to the HOAs and say, get it FHA approved so that I can sell my house that way. Going on down to here, guys, there are some costs that FHA and VA cannot pay for. There's a few of them. So with that in mind, I put $400. They don't go over 400, but that's why I say, did the seller pay these closing costs not to exceed $400? But that's only for FHA and VA deals. Earnest money, guys, decide what you want to do on that. I will tell you this, through my notes on earnest money. I don't go over $7,500. I have a reason why. So I don't care how big the house is. First off, guys, I've sold a lot of houses. I've seen earnest money change hands 4 times. 4 times. It doesn't happen often, right? So with that in mind, like, what are we really that worried about earnest money? But hey, if you have the opportunity, you have it. So for me, 7,500 is what I put in there as a max. Here's why. The minute we hit 7,500, and I actually mean 7,499 is my max. The minute we hit 7,500, instead of my seller being able to take that buyer to small claims court, which is cheap and fast and inexpensive for my client, now we have to go on to county court. So with that in mind, if I'm like, oh, well, I'm gonna make it 8,000. Well, now my client has to go to county court and they're gonna hire an attorney. And it's gonna get expensive and it's gonna take longer to battle over earnest money. What question do you have, Jen?
Yeah, so I was showing someone a house, and it was like under 400,000, so like 359.
Yeah.
And the earth was $10,000.
So,
I thought, I don't know, maybe is there like a thought vertically would be like a percentage of the house, or maybe it doesn't matter. I don't know.
it can be however you want it to be. I mean, I can tell you, I've gone with a buyer that was VA, didn't have a lot of money. They're gonna do a full financing on the house, right? With that in mind, you know what our earnest money was? $500. I've used a truck title as earnest money. So you can get really creative with earnest money. It does not necessarily have to be what they have in that little box on MLS. It can be whatever you want it to be, as long as they agree to it, right? Like I said, I've used a truck title as earnest money, so whatever you gotta do to make it work, but with like some VA people, I've had to go in way under what they're asking for. I don't know why you'd ever ask for 10,000 on a $350,000 house, but I don't know, my philosophy is this. I round up to the nearest 100,000, so a 350 house, I'd round up to 400,000, I take 1%, so I do 4,000. Anything from 300 to 399 would be 4,000. But it's however you guys want to do your business, that's how I do mine.
The 11.5 says earnest money, minimum amount of earnest money deposit US dollars in the form of, and you're saying not over 7,499, they're adding a max in when that's listed as a minimum. You don't wanna, you wouldn't wanna go into that contract and change the word minimum to maximum, because that would be altering this contract in a way that we don't get to do. right?
Yeah, I would never do that, I would just leave it alone, but I just don't go over 7,500, I just don't do that. And then here's the fun thing, if you go.
You say that specifically on the contract.
I tell my seller, I say, hey, look, here's how you earn this money. I can tell you, my bread and butter is 400 to 800,000. I don't go over 800,000 on listings. I've done it, but not that many times.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, my formula of rounding to the nearest 100,000 works very well. And I don't have any pushback, but if I had someone's like, why don't we do 10,000? I educate them around it. Well, if you had to go to court, it gets more expensive. Now, if you go above, so it goes 7,500 to 35,000 is county. You go a penny over 35,000, here we go, district, it gets even more expensive. So if you're like, man, it's $1 million listing, we're gonna do like 50,000 earnest money, cool, but if there's an earnest money dispute, it's gonna cost a lot of money, take a lot of time. Is that the best for your client? I don't know, you have to decide what that looks like. You're there to educate them on the pros and cons, they make the decision, right? No one in our line of work should ever make a decision. That's up to the client. The other thing about earnest money is it says in the form of blank. You guys ever see where it says good funds? I don't know what that really means. Good funds are funds for closing. I like to put in check or wire. I don't like to put in personal check because what if I'm gonna use my business checkbook, right? I put in check or wire, but do what you want to do on that one. 11.6, this is the different ways that we can get paid, and not we, but the seller can get paid, right? I check all 3 boxes. They don't have to make that call on that day. Where do they make the call? Usually at the closing table. What do you have, Brenda?
Oh, no, I, put online certified funds.
Sir, what's a certified fund?
Certified check.
Where's that defined inside the contract? Where's that defined in this contract? Where does it say certified funds in there? Where is certified check? What is a certified check mean? I certify my own check. Does that work? I'm just saying, if it's not defined in the contract, it's a phrase that we can't generally use. You know, so I don't know, like cashier's check, that's a known thing. A certified fund or certified check, I'm like, what does that really mean? What's the definition on that? So if you want to do a cashier's check, you could. I don't know, do I really want to make people have to go to the bank before they drop off earnest money? Like, why does it matter?
Well, one bounce. I heard like.
That's not true. I've had a cashier's check bounce. So it's up to you. I have. And I've also seen fraud with them as well. There's a lot of scams with them. So I personally, I don't care. I mean, the reality is I've kept earnest money 4 times. So why, I'm not even that worried about it. But the reality is I'm good with a personal check, business check, whatever the title company will take. Yeah, the check bounces, it's done anyway. Yeah, if the check bounces, it's over. Exactly, you know, so I wouldn't worry about it, but I mean, you can put certified check. I don't really know what a certified check means. It's not defined here. I do know what a cashier's check means, so it's up to you. But 11.6, I check all 3 options. I can tell you, the reality is they either get a wire or a cashier's check. I've never seen a closing company's trust account check ever happen. Now, FERPTA, when I'm with a client, I don't like to be like, well, that client, I don't know, they look like an American, so I'm not gonna say anything about this, right? I don't know about you guys, but we can all look certain ways that we can be American or we cannot be American, right? We can, FERPTA may or may not apply. So all I simply say is, are you a US citizen? And if they say yes, I know it doesn't apply, right? If they say no, it may or may not, right? Permanent residence, it could, it may not, it just depends. So me, I say, hey, let's talk to title up front about this and make sure that we're good to go. Because here's the reality, guys. If you're not good to go on FERPTA, and if you get to the closing table and your client, FERPTA does apply, they will withhold 15%. 15% of their proceeds, or the purchase price, not the proceeds. So I saw a house for $1 million. They're gonna keep $150,000. What if my equity position is not 150? I have to now bring money to the closing table. What if I was gonna take that $150,000 and go buy a home tomorrow in a different country? I can't do that. So the whole idea of FERPA is to make sure that I pay taxes that I owe to the US government before I leave. The way around it, if I am leaving the country, is to have the title company get all my tax certifications, showing that I'm caught up, and then I can take all my money with me. But if you find out at the closing table, your client's gonna have a lot of money held back. So I would definitely approach that first off. And the question is, are you a US citizen? 'Cause if not, say, hey, this might apply, let's talk to title. Don't ever try to figure out if it applies to them or not. Let title figure that out. And if it does, you just need to check that box that says is. Same thing with Colorado withholding, right? Your client's like, hey, Will, I'm leaving Colorado after closing. That's awesome. Well, hey, a portion of your money might have to be held back. Why don't we talk to title now so that by closing, they get all the tax stuff figured out and make sure that you can take all your proceeds with you, right? We're authorized to accept earnest money deposits, right? We can actually take those checks. I don't encourage that. I have worked in brokerages where they hold earnest money. We don't at this brokerage. So I would definitely have it held by the title company. I would not take that liability on. Inclusion
Deposits, sorry.
Yeah, earnest money deposits. I would not want to hold that money, never.
Title holds.
I like to have title hold it. So whatever title company you're doing, that's who I like to have do it.
Got it.
Now, section 13.1.1, guys, there's a lot of stuff that's included in the house sale, right? A lot. Like, for example, mirrors, right? I don't know about you guys, but I know somebody that had a $10,000 antique mirror in their house. So if I sell the house and we don't exclude that item, is it included? I think it is. Someone just got a $10,000 antique mirror. Now, when we think about mirrors that are automatically included, we think in the bathroom, right? The vanity in the bathroom, who's gonna take that? But it says mirrors, it didn't say bathroom mirrors. So if they have some fancy mirror in some hallway, make sure that's excluded, right? Not just on here, but also in the contract to buy and sell. But there's a lot of other stuff on here, right? So for example, let's say they have a nice fireplace and they have like a metal grate in front of it and their last name's Story. So there's like this cool S design, they've had it custom made. Well, if you look down here, these are things that are included that are not attached. My fireplace screen. So all of a sudden this cool heirloom from my family from 300 years is now included in the sale because my agent didn't think to tell me we need to exclude that. I can tell you, I'm gonna sue my agent over that, right? Or if they have a really cool chandelier. Whenever I'm with the seller, I ask them, I go, are there any light fixtures or anything like that you wanna take? So they may not think about it. They might think, oh yeah, I was gonna swap that the day before close, right? That's my great grandma Gigi's, chandelier. Well, get that figured out on the front end. So be familiar with what's automatically included because it's a lot of stuff, right? And if you mess that up, who's gonna pay for it? You're probably gonna pay for it out of your pocket. Even storage sheds, they're automatically included. I always think it's funny when people write storage sheds into a contract because they're already on there. So you don't actually need to write that on. Now, this is where people get a little confused. 13.1.3 says this. All the personal property that I'm selling is free and clear of any liens and encumbrances except this, right? So what would I be selling that has a lien or encumbrance on it? Well, let's say that my solar panels are on a loan. I'm not leasing them. I'm paying them off over the years and then I'm gonna own them. That's an encumbrance on the house, right? That loan for the solar panels. So that's where that would go. Now, if I have leased solar panels, if you look below, it says leased items further down. But if I'm paying something off, maybe I bought my TV through Rent-A-Center and I'm gonna leave the TV as an inclusion, that's a leased item, or that's an item that's gonna have an encumbrance on it, right? So make sure as you're going through, you see solar panels, you see water softeners, you see security systems, you guys own that or not, figure out where that is. So the worst thing that happens is as the listing agent, you don't know this, and you get an offer that now obligates the seller to stuff legally, and you didn't do it right because you didn't get the information on the front end. So anything that can be leased or loaned, you should ask them, do you have anything like that in your house? So if it could have an encumbrance on it, it goes in 13.1.3. Now, other stuff, my refrigerator and all that, maybe I still am paying for my refrigerator because I bought it on my Visa card. That's different. That's not an encumbrance on the house or the refrigerator. It's on my Visa, but that's different, right? So that's where I'm gonna put all of my stuff that I'm leaving behind, right? The refrigerator, the stove, the oven, all that, my hot tub, whatever that looks like. Now, leased items, so when you're talking, you're seeing the solar panels on the roof. You guys own those? Do you guys loan those? Do you guys lease them? Lease them, this is where they're gonna go, right? So keep that in mind. You wanna get that clarity when you're there. They also say that they're gonna give the lease documents to the buyer, right? What a weird idea, right? If you're gonna take over a lease, you probably wanna know what that looks like. Now exclusions, keep in mind, exclusions could be a lot of things. That fancy thing in the fireplace, that screen. It could be that fancy chandelier. Now, my recommendation, if I'm gonna exclude a chandelier or something that's attached, just go ahead and swap it before you go to market, right? Like why have that beautiful chandelier excluded? The buyer is like, oh my God, it's great. And they go write the offer, like, oh, that's not included. Just swap it out on day one before you ever take photos. That's my recommendation for an exclusion like that. But make sure they're very clear. So we had something not that long ago where a refrigerator was included, right? And it said refrigerators with an S. So there was one in the refrigerator in the kitchen, there's one in the garage, right? So you think there's two refrigerators, there's an S. Well, one's in the kitchen, one's in the garage. The seller took the one in the garage because he just saw refrigerator. He didn't realize it was plural, right? So if there's two refrigerators, I'd list refrigerator, kitchen, refrigerator, garage. I get very specific because if you guys haven't heard this joke, I'll tell it again. Who does an unclear contract favor? The attorney, right? So with that in mind, make it very clear, okay? If there's any trade fixtures, this is where they would go. Now, parking and storage facilities, I see people that have like a single family house and they put 2-car attached garage. I don't think that's really necessary. In fact, it truly isn't. What this is for is if you have a condo and the condo has like a parking space that's yours, like parking space 125, or some of those condo buildings also, you have a storage unit within it. That storage unit, it's not the storage shed in my backyard, right? That's already included. We saw that further up in the contract. So it's just the ones that are like, it's usually condos and townhomes are where you're gonna use this. But if I have a townhome, and again, the parking's attached, I don't think it needs to be in there. It's really more of, I have a townhome and all the parking's over there and I have to reference that, right? Now, water rights. Who knows a ton about water rights? Who's a water rights attorney? Yeah, I'm not either, right? Water or mineral. So with that in mind, guys, be very careful. If there's deeded water rights, make sure the documentation exists. I can tell you, I sold a house in Lakewood with water rights not that long ago. We had the documentation. My seller had never verified it. The buyer didn't really care if they existed or not. They were just like, well, if it's real, it's real. If not, it's not real. So it wasn't a big deal. But if someone really has the water rights and is going to sell them, this is where it's going to go. And they, if we're representing the buyer, make sure you get an attorney to verify those rights if it matters to the buyer. The buyer might say, I see it as a bonus, but if they're not real, I don't care, right? If there's a well, put your permit number in here. It's a big deal, right? And there's any growing of crops, right? That'd be in there. And that's not just going like, you know, my little veggie garden in my backyard. We're talking like agricultural at that point.
Would you be able to research that stuff before you walk in the room and try to get somebody to sign this? Like, could you look up that well permit, have it ready on there already?
You can, there's a website, you can look at bill of well permits. Now, if that well was before 1972, it may not be permitted, but it would be grandfathered in. At that point, you're gonna need to get a permit number. It's a pretty easy process. But you can look it
Is
up.
it something you should do ahead of time before you walk in the door and try to get this?
That's up to you. I don't personally do it.
Okay, got it, thanks.
Going on down. So the seller's representing that they have title and it's just in their name, right? This talks about delivery of documents. They're gonna give you all the big things that they have. Do they have leases? Do they have ILCs? Do they have surveys? They're gonna give you a copy of that, right? And then going on through section 14, this is the type of deed we're gonna do, right? I generally see one of 3 deeds when I'm listing a house, right? I don't see quit claim. That'd be like if I'm gonna add my wife to title or something like that, or take somebody off title, like a family deal maybe. I don't ever see bargain and sale. What I do see is this, I see general warranty, I see special warranty a lot. Those are the 2 I see most. And then the last deed I see is a personal representative's deed. That means generally that it's an estate sale and somebody has died or somebody's incapacitated. Like I worked with a woman, she had awful dementia. She had 5 houses of hers that I was selling. I never actually talked to her. She had a personal representative that did everything, right? So personal representative's deed does not always mean they died. A lot of people think that's what it is, but if you have somebody that has dementia and they have a conservator, someone that's overseeing them, it'd also be a PR or a personal representative's deed. Make sure if you're using a personal representative's deed, talk to title and ask them, how are you gonna want this title for the signing of it, right? Because that's gonna matter. And then when you go and put it on MLS, put in your confidential information. This is an estate sale or whatever. It's a personal representative's deed. It'll be signed as John, personal representative of the estate of Sue Story or whatever, right? And have it in there, because when I look at those houses, I'm like, man, I can't even write an offer until I talk to the listing agent because they didn't put in there what needs to be titled as. And then those listing agents, you call them, they don't pick up their phone, so it just really stinks, you know?
So are we putting a checkbox in all of these or just those three
The
specific?
one that your client's comfortable with. I mean, it just depends. I said it's generally special warranty, general warranty, or personal representatives. I'd say 85% of the time it's general warranty. Is how I see it. Some sellers like special warranty, because what they're saying, I'm only representing ownership to this house during the time that I've owned it. So with that in mind, I'm only gonna tell you that that's the amount of time that I can represent that there's guaranteed ownership. General warranty is saying that from beginning of time,
Yeah.
I'm doing that, right? Now, so some sellers like to go to special warranties, like, I don't know what happened before I lived in the house. And I get that, and the reality is with your buyer, if they get title insurance, it doesn't matter what the seller represents, because the title insurance is gonna cover them. So, you know, some people are sketched out by a special warranty deed when they're on the buy side. I don't get it if you're getting title insurance. I've never done a deal without title insurance, so. Monetary encumbrances, right? This is saying that property's free and clear of all liens and everything like that. That's what it's going through, is what is actually owned on the property. Now, if there is an encumbrance that they're gonna try to leave behind, that's where you want to fill it in. Went on down, we don't really do abstract titles in this state. So the seller is gonna give the buyer a copy of a title insurance policy, right? They're gonna send that over to them. Possession, you can put in here a certain time, you can say what it looks like. I usually say as negotiated in contract, because we don't really know. I mean, your client might say, I need to be here for 30 days. Well, what if I get a cash offer that closes in 10 days and does possession for 30? I mean, it's weird. Or what if the offer is so big that they say, I wanted to move in 30 days, well, I'll move in 20 for that price. So I usually put for that as negotiated in contract. Now we have obligations, right? So in section 18, it talks about our actual obligations in the contract. So I love this one right here. So you guys understand that we have to disclose, section 18.1, we have to disclose any things to prospective buyers that are adverse material facts. So we're like, hey, Jeff, just want to let you know, my roof, it leaks like a sieve. They've told you that. Now everybody, you have to say, just so you know, the roof leaks like a sieve, right? Now there are stigmatized facts, right? Did somebody die in the house, or not die, I think it's die or commit suicide? Someone with HIV live in the house? There's a lot of different things, stigmatized facts. With that in mind, you can't disclose those without your seller's permission, right? But I always tell my seller, hey, look, at the end of the day, we want to let them know. But there's stuff down here like non-conforming uses, right? So you guys see in broker remarks of like bedroom downstairs is non-conforming, right? The reason we're saying that is because we have to disclose it. So if we know that there's a structural defect or any of these things, we have to disclose it every time. More obligations to the seller. They are either going to agree to do a seller's property disclosure or not do one. I don't know why you would ever not do one. I've seen many sellers do it. I've seen investors that say, I've owned the house for 20 years, but I've never lived in it. But the reality is, in 20 years, if you owned a house as a landlord, you probably replaced a furnace or something. You know something about the house. You know, even that woman that I told you about that I sold 5 of her houses, she had dementia. Her attorney that oversaw all of it was in Texas, never saw any of the houses. But all the property disclosure asks is, do you have any issues that you know of any of these? And she didn't know of any of those issues, so she signed it and it was blank. So I don't know why you wouldn't do it. If you really don't know anything, you still sign it and you're saying, I have nothing to disclose. And she didn't, right? The lady with dementia might have had a ton to disclose, but we couldn't figure out what it was. You know, so it's up to you. I always recommend to my sellers, I say, look, this is your CYA form. If you get sued later because your roof leaks like a sieve, but you put it in here, you can say, well, Your Honor, I disclosed that, right? And if their question is, Will, should I disclose blank? My answer is almost always yes, right? If they say, Will, there's a huge stain on the carpet underneath our area rug, should I disclose it? Absolutely, that's a hidden fact I don't know about. But I will tell you, if there's a huge hole in the wall, like huge, and it's not covered up by a picture or something, and they say, should I disclose this? Well, it's not hidden. I'd say, you know, you can put it if you want, it's not gonna hurt, but it's pretty freaking obvious. So I say, why not, is the way I look at it, okay? Lead-based paint, guys, I can tell you this. The fun thing about lead-based paint, you know, they've tied the penalty to inflation, so it's still going up. So it started at 10,000, I think it's up to like 18,000. So if you guys don't do a lead-based paint disclosure, you can get in trouble. So I would definitely do it. Also, the office won't let you get paid, right? Because they're not gonna sign off on your file. Now, you guys know when carbon monoxide detectors have to be in by? Anybody? No? It's not by closing, it's before you do any showings, right? Just keep in mind, my house is vacant, I mean, it's an investment property I'm selling. If I have fuel-fired heater or appliance, right, if I have one of those, I have to have it in there. Because imagine I'm in there going and showing this lovely family the house, no one's been in there for days, and we're in there, also we get really tired, and we just fall asleep and die, right? That's from carbon monoxide. So with that in mind, you have to have the detectors in before the showings, right, is how that needs to be done. Like, I don't think that they should ever come up on inspection. If they're coming up on inspection and appraisal, you already messed up. Now, I love this one right here. 18.2.4, the condition of the property. You can have normal wear and tear, but at the end of the day, that's, it needs to stay in the same place as the date of a contract for sale, right? So I've had a client, we got their house under contract, and they headed out of state. And on the day of closing, their grass was like, I don't know, like 12 inches high. Like, we didn't know we had to cut it. Well, you do, right? It has to be as the same or better. Now, if my refrigerator dies, I got this brand new, like, awesome refrigerator, and it dies while I'm under contract, I have to do the same refrigerator, as good or better. I can't be like, oh, well, it died, I'll just go on Craigslist and get some beater. No, it has to be as good or better, and that's what it's talking about there. Now, section 19 talks about the rights to cancel. These are the standard rights. Now, I will just tell you all this. In my opinion, the best practice is if someone really doesn't want to work with you, I personally would not hold them to a contract because, they're going to tell all their friends, they're going to go on social media. They'll probably go to Dora and probably try to lodge a complaint against you. I don't know. I look at it this way. If you don't want to work with me, I'm not going to make you work with me. That's up to y'all how you want to run your business. Well, there's a few examples, but this is not limited to what it can be. So they have like 6 different things in there, reasons that sellers can walk away, like, client abandonment. God, you would be accused of client abandonment? That would really suck, right? So with that in mind, like, if they want to get out, you can let them out. It's up to you. Also, we have the right to cancel too. We're not necessarily stuck with them, right? If they're not cooperating and stuff like that, we're able to walk away. So these are the rights from either side to cancel. Now, section 20 is pretty fun. All those times that we keep earnest money, like I said, I've seen it change hands 4 times. 2 times I kept it, 2 times I lost it. With that in mind, how's it split up? Does the seller get all of it? Do we go 50-50s or do we do another? It's up to you. I like the 50-50 because it covers my marketing, So I actually just got to keep some earnest money. It was pretty cool. So that's up to you how you want to do it. Just talk to your seller and make sure they're good with it. Now, at the end of the day, your seller cannot obligate you to pay for stuff, which is pretty cool. They can't be like, yeah, I had all this work done and, Will's going to pay for it. No, it doesn't work that way. Unless agreed upon in writing. So that's what 21 talks about, right? 22 is just letting you know, hey, Mr. Seller, there's a lot of different people you can go to get settlement services from, and they all have different costs. So whoever you want to go to, right? I tell you, this is the reality. Is they say, what title company do you use? I'm like, I use blah, blah, blah. And they're like, awesome, let's use blah, blah, blah. It was weird. I actually had a closing yesterday that was not with my normal title company, but it's someone that's from our industry that I've worked with for years. So I get why she wouldn't work with that other one. But generally, if they don't work in our industry, they're like, oh, you work with Chicago Title? Cool, I'll work with Chicago Title, right? This is how it generally goes down. But we are disclosing in 22 that they all have different costs, and you can look wherever you want. Now, the nice thing here in 23, I told you about that seller that moved to New Hampshire, the grass got this high. I was not required or obligated to go mow the lawn, but he was in New Hampshire, and we had to close that day, so I mowed the lawn. But if you look at 23, it says that we have no obligation to do that, right? Which is pretty nice. 24 says that no one's going to discriminate here. So I want to talk about a thing called love letters. When I'm on the buy side, I love the love letter. Oh my God, this family is going to be so great for this house. We're going to build upon your memories. Like, we see the jungle gym in the backyard, the family photos all over. Oh my God, like those people, you can like pull their heartstrings with it, right? Or if you're working with veterans, the love letter is so impactful. This family, they've served the country. They're trying to build a family here. So good, right? The problem is I take this offer because it's going to have a family, and I don't take the one with the cat lady that has a dozen cats and never was going to have a family. She could sue and say, you took them over me to the familia status, right? So with that in mind, I don't like the love letter on the listing side. It helps on the buy side, and I send them all the time. On the listing side, I just tell my sellers, say, hey, look, we don't want to be accused of discrimination. So at the end of the day, we can judge this offer based on the offer, or we can also look at the love letter. Do you want to risk being accused of discrimination? And they usually say, let's just look at the offer. Now, I'll tell you this too. It's not limited to that either. For example, in Colorado Springs, say I write a love letter, I'm an Air Force person and blah, 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 Air Force. Now, Jeff's an Army guy, right? He writes an offer on the same one. They take me because I'm Air Force, like, oh, he's an Army guy, we don't like Army people. You know, in Colorado Springs, you cannot discriminate based on branch of military. Yeah, really? Do you know in, I can't remember what county it is, but the county where Gunnison is, you can't discriminate based upon political affiliations. I can be like, oh, I'm not going with you because you're one of those people. Boulder County, is it political discrimination? You can't?
Boulder County is pretty not political.
Are you sure? Okay, so there's another one, right? So with that in mind, they can be like, oh, you're a Democrat or a Republican, so I'm not gonna sell to you, right? So at the end of the day, guys, who cares? Just don't discriminate and don't look at the love letters if you're on the listing side, on the buy side, they're powerful. So what were you saying? So next thing,
I think I like, the Firefly, you know, maybe the garage or something while you're selling now. If the seller is not here, but they move to Florida,
Yeah.
and now they want to sell their house.
Yep.
Are they like responsible for hiring a landscaper to keep track now, or is that kind of like?
I mean, it says you're not responsible. So, I mean, I imagine it falls on the seller. Now, if you said, hey, Mr. Seller, I do full concierge service. I'll take care of your house. I'll do all the yard work when you're gone. And you put this in writing, it's gonna fall on you. But if short of an agreement in writing where you say, I'm gonna do this, it falls on them.
Well, I've been hearing more about concierge service.
But what does that really mean? Because concierge service, that word's used a lot of ways. One way it's used, I like to tell my clients, I'm full concierge service. If someone needs to go there to meet someone for the furnace inspection, I'll go meet them. You don't have to trouble yourself with that, right? That's one type of concierge service. Another concierge service that we hear a lot, there's different people that offer this, like Keller Offers offers this, where you can get a loan from Keller Offers, or maybe it's Keller Mortgage, I might be mixing it up. I think it's Keller Offers. You can get a loan from them to fix your house up before you go on the market. That's called concierge service by a lot of people too. So that word's used in a lot of different ways.
I think I've been hearing more and more about real estate even offering that, and eventually that'll be.
I mean, the loaning money to fix a house up. And I got a $10,000 loan out right now on a house. I installed, she didn't have heat in her house. I installed heat in the house. I get paid back at closing in about a month. So, you know, it depends. Is that concierge service? Is it a loan? It's whatever, but it's a very loosely used term. I've heard it used a lot of different ways in our industry. So just, if you're gonna offer it, it's whatever you want it to be, because it's not like some defined thing, you know? I just think it sounds nice when I say I give you concierge, you know, service when it comes to customer service. But I don't loan money to everybody to put a heating system in. This is a client that I felt it was the right thing to do, so.
Questions? On the love letters,
Yeah.
I've seen some listings that say no love.
They
letters.
do.
Can you do that?
I still send them. I don't care. I see listings that say no escalation clauses. I don't care. I see listings that say, we're not gonna look at offers till Monday and it's Friday. And I say, I don't care. I'm putting the deadline tonight.
That's what I do.
You know, I don't care. Like, they can say whatever they want, you know? You guys, 25 says this. It says, before by signing this document, you're doing a very big deal. So you should make sure you check with a tax and legal advice, right? There's huge legal things. Like, if I bought my house in 2019 and I bought it in June versus buying it in 2019 in December, if I bought my house in 2019 in December, I don't necessarily want to sell it yet. I'll probably want to get past the 2-year mark because the tax consequences, right? But we're not here to advise on tax consequences, right? So that's why it says, here's the tax consequences. If there is an issue, 26 says we're going to start mediation before we go to court. Luckily, mediation's cheap. The bad thing about mediation, in my experience, nothing really happens there. Everyone spends about $500 to do nothing. However, if we go to the next level, that's court. Now, what it says about attorney fees, I love this. Attorney fees, the prevailing party will have all reasonable costs and expenses signed or paid out. Well, the reality is judges don't actually have to abide by this. Contracts are kind of weird in that sense. They can overrule them. So you don't always get all your reasonable costs and expenses paid for. Now, I want to bring up something else. As everyone in here from Keller Williams Realty, yes, we are, right? So with that in mind, we all have to do what's called our seller advisory. Have you guys looked at the seller advisory? The last provision in our seller advisory, I think it's number or letter J, but I could be off on that, says that actually at the end of the day, no one's responsible for anyone's attorney costs. So this right here, if you're at this brokerage, does not apply. That, so you're like, you know, that seller screwed me out of my commission. I'm gonna sue them and they're gonna have to pay my attorney costs. So why not do it? Well, the reality is, if you read your seller advisory, which you probably should because you're giving it to a client, it actually has in there where it says that we do not get attorney fees covered. They don't get ours and we don't get theirs.
Can you give me a pen?
Absolutely. I don't know if that works or not. All right, if not, I got a few in my pocket. Additional provisions, I mean, you can like write in here whatever you want. I mean, here's my contract, guys, that I use. I've got a lot of blue writing and it just keeps going, right? So I write a lot of additional provisions into mine. It's however you want to do it. One additional provision that is 100% needed, if you're on a team, you have to have a team disclosure. So my team disclosure reads, broker is a member of Her Group Colorado. Therefore, Her Group Colorado is designated as broker under this buyer listing contract or whatever it is, right? So you have to have a team disclosure if you have a team of who's on the team that's licensed, right? And I'd also disclose who's not licensed on the team as well. Otherwise, your additional provisions, you can go with whatever makes the most sense to you. I will tell you this, as much as possible, when you do an additional provision or a special clause, go to the clause manual, go to the clauses that we have in CTM. Don't write your own stuff as much as possible. And if you do write your own stuff, write it like a 5-year-old could explain or a 5th grader, right? I hate it when I see these like fancy written ones. I'm like, you trying to be an attorney? Because words make a difference in law. If you use certain words like, oh, this sounds fancy, I'm gonna be so smart, you don't know what implications that can have. So be careful with that. Going on down, section 30 says that unless it's already listed in here, no one else is gonna benefit from this contract, right? It's only really for these parties involved. 31 talks about the different ways we can communicate, right? So I can mail you stuff, I can do electronic notice. Now, this is the one that always gets me, is over here by email. A lot of people put like internet. I don't know what that means. What does it mean to get electronic notice from the internet? Does that mean you can slide in my DMs? Is that what that means? Because you're gonna snap me, you know? I got a TikTok account. I've been in like 6 months. I got an Instagram account. I go in maybe once a month. So it's like with those 2 accounts, if you send me an Instagram message and say, hey, Mr. Story, I got a question about this, I'm not gonna see it. So I hate the word internet there. What does that mean? I also see CTM. I don't get that either, because how do we communicate through CTM? From what I understand, it's through an email is what CTM does. So I don't know why people write CTM in there. But you can write whatever you want to do. But I would just be careful. If you put internet, I think you're opening yourself up to people saying, hey, I sent you a Facebook message 3 weeks ago, you never responded. You abandoned me. I'm your client, you abandoned me, right? So whatever you put in there, just be aware of the implications around it, right? Going on down, guys, if we do end up in court, we're gonna go by Colorado law, which makes a ton of sense to me, right? We are in the state of Colorado. If we're gonna modify any of this, guys, just so you guys know, it's gotta be in writing and we're gonna all sign off on it. Now, some people ask, what's a counterpart? Maybe if I'm sitting down with someone's wife and me and her signed the papers, you know, we signed the paper, but her husband, maybe he's military, so he signs it electronically, even though they're on different sets of paper, the 2 together make a full contract. That's a counterpart. This right here in 34 is saying, hey, I don't care what y'all promised orally or anything like that, what's gone on before. If it's not in this document, it does not exist. 35 says that you're gonna give the seller a copy, which that makes so much sense for me. And then lastly, as you see here, the brokerage firm, Keller Williams Realty Downtown, is authorizing us to execute this on their behalf, right? So that's what the contract looks like. Does anyone have any questions on that?
So you have 2 sellers, they don't want to sign in the same spot, they kind of mad at each other. Can you do like?
Yeah, husband and wife getting divorced or something like that, yeah, and she's like, so you owe me with her? And you're like, I don't want to piss her off, so I'm gonna print out a second one for her, so she doesn't see this handwriting and get triggered or something. You could totally do that.
Is this some of the counterparts piece?
Yeah. So I'm gonna run through this again. If you guys gotta get out of here, it's fine. There's 3 minutes left. That should be most of the time, but this is literally how I explain it to a seller, and it's pretty damn quick. So I always say, hey, Mr. Seller, do you want me to read this to you word for word or paraphrase it? They are always like, paraphrase it. God. So, all right, awesome, guys. But hey, just so you know that this contract is an approved form by the Real Estate Commission. I say that so they have trust in it. They're not like, who's this guy, right? Like, oh, it's from the Real Estate Commission. It's gotta be a good contract, right? And I go down here, I say, hey, I'm gonna be your seller's agent. That means I'm gonna be your coach. If I was a transaction broker, I'd be more like a referee. Going on down, I'm part of a multi-person firm. There's about 350 agents in my office. However, at the end of the day, you're gonna be dealing with me primarily as your broker. This is your house. Did I get your address right? Fantastic. Did I spell your name right? Now, sometimes you won't have the name right because you pull it from the county record. And they're like, well, I got married, my last name doesn't match up to that anymore, or whatever. Or maybe it's misspelled in county record, but they don't match. Call the title company, say, hey, how do you want to do this? A lot of times, if I got married, I changed my last name, but my old one still says Story on it. With that in mind, the title company's gonna say, Will, do you still have the ID that says Will Story, not Will, whatever your new name is? If I do, they'll say, sign it as Will Story, because that's a lot easier than changing it. But if the seller's name doesn't match, call title and figure out how they want to handle it best. Okay, so I say, did I spell your name right? Fantastic. You'll primarily deal with me. This is your house that we're selling. We're not doing a lease, so I'm gonna skip right over this part. I have your listing period set at a year. However, hopefully we'll get it done a lot quicker than that. Going on down that day in the future, that is the end of our contract. It will be moved to the next business day if it's on a weekend or a holiday. Going on down to here, this says that I am your agent. However, if one of my buyers wants to buy your house, I do have to become that referee role. So in that case, I'd let you know that one of our buyers wants to buy your house, and you'd understand at that point going forward that I would have to be a referee, not your coach. Section 5 goes over all the duties that I'm legally required to really perform for everybody in the public. Section 6, though, this is the big one that you get, Mr. Seller. I'm here to promote only your interest. I'm going to seek a price and the terms that are acceptable to you. I'm going to negotiate for you. I'm also going to counsel and advise you throughout the transaction. Sound good? Awesome. Section 7, we're going to do a X% commission. Out of that X, I'm going to offer the buyer Y%. So with that in mind, you're not paying those together. It's that percent that you pay me and the percent I give to the buyer. We're not doing a lease, so this part doesn't matter. Going on through, when I put your house in the market, I'm gonna put it everywhere on the internet. I'm gonna have the address, I'm gonna put it out there so a lot of people see it. That's what this talks about. We're gonna access your house through a lockbox. It talks about that there. Here it says that these are the different people that I can give access to your house. I recommend giving it to licensed brokers so that we can do showings. Licensed appraisers have been through a background check. I recommend that as well. I also include these other people that are part of my team on here. Number 9 talks about the different ways we're going to market it. We just went through my marketing plan, so it just says we're going to go according to my marketing and what we discussed already. Section 10, really quick, are you in a listing agreement with anybody? Awesome, you're not? Fantastic. Or if they said yes, I'd say, cool, did they submit any, like a list of people they've negotiated with? Yes or no? Okay, cool. Going on down, this is the price that we're talking about. Now that we've seen the house, it's going to be $500,000. We'll take all the different terms because we want to have as many options as possible when it comes to getting offers for your house. The earnest money I recommended, $500,000 would be $6,000. Does that work for you? Because if they don't have $6,000, I doubt they can close the deal. They usually say yes. I don't get a lot of pushback on earnest money. I say I took all these boxes for your proceeds. You don't have to make a decision today. Usually that's made at the closing table. Just start thinking about how you want to get your money. And really quick, FIRPTA, that only applies to certain people. Are you a US citizen? You are. Fantastic. It doesn't apply to you. They say, no, I'm not. Well, hey, we do want to check with the title company to see if there are any issues associated with that. When you do sell the house, Mr. Seller, are you leaving Colorado? Now, I might already know this, I wouldn't ask, but if I don't know, like, yeah, we are. Well, hey, again on that, let's get ahead of the game because I don't want any of your money held back at closing to pay off taxes. Let's talk to title now and make sure we get all that sorted out. Now, going on down, there's a lot of stuff already included. As we walked around your house, we talked about the shed, the blinds, and the different stuff like that. Was there any of those things that you actually want to keep that we need to exclude? No, fantastic. I know we talked about the solar panels being leased, so I've checked this box right here. Now, the personal property that you're going to leave behind, it's listed here. Is that correct? Fantastic. And then in terms of stuff you're going to take, we've got all that listed here. Does that look right to you? Awesome. Now, going on down, I don't believe that your house has water rights because let's be real, most of our houses don't, right? We are in Denver Metro. We're not out in Gunnison, right? So I say, I don't believe your house has water rights, does it? No, not that you know of. Cool. Going on down, we're going to give them a general warranty deed. That is the highest and best deed that exists. So with that in mind, are you good with that? Most say yes to that. Going on down, the possession, we'll see what it ends up looking like and what the offers come in. We'll really figure it out around there. Sorry. Also, I highly recommend you do a seller's property disclosure form. It's a lovely 7-page form where you tell them everything you know about the house. And that way you're protected. If you disclose something, they sue you later. You're protected because you've disclosed it. Are you okay with that? Awesome, awesome. Hey, these are the standard ways to cancel a contract. If you have any questions about those, let me know. if we do end up keeping earnest money, which I've only seen a handful of times in my career, we're gonna split it 50-50 because at the end of the day, that goes to cover my marketing costs. Sound good? Fantastic. We're not gonna discriminate against anybody. If we get any love letters on your house, we're gonna judge it based on the offer, not the love letter, because that could lead to a discrimination claim. You don't wanna be accused of discrimination, do you? Yeah, I don't either. Fantastic. Well, hey, just so you know, if you want, seek legal counsel. I mean, this is a big deal. We're selling a house, we're not selling shoes. So if you want to talk to a lawyer, just let me know. That's no big deal. And then going on down, here's my additional provisions, and I go through and explain those if you do them. If we are going to communicate, it's gonna be physical delivery or electronic. Most of our communication will go through email. Do you guys have any questions? No? Awesome. Here's where you sign. So that's how fast I got through with the seller. Any questions? No? Cool. Well, yeah.
But if you do decide to do a physical like contract, how would you give a copy to them right there and then?
So I always bring a printed copy with me to the appointment.
Okay.
And if not, I just email it to them right then because I can deliver a notice by email. Right? So I can just email right there for that's why I have this as a computer. So I'm always on the internet. So with that in mind, I'll just email right to them from there.
What is that? Is that an iPad?
It's an iPad, yeah.
Oh,
There you go.
They're fun. Well, is anyone on the internet? I don't know who's out there. If y'all have any questions, let me know. You guys, next month, I don't know the date, but it's probably the first Thursday of the month. I'll be teaching the buyer agency. And then in December, I'll do common disclosures and addendums. So feel free to reach out to me whenever. On the weekends, if you call the broker hotline, you're gonna get me usually, unless I'm camping, and I'm here to help out anyway, guys. I love looking at people's business ideas and plans. So if you ever want to sit down and talk to me about what you're thinking of doing, just let me know. I have lit piles of money on fire in my career. And if you want to avoid lighting money on fire like I've done, feel free to call me. I'll tell you what I think about different types of lead generation, business planning, all of that. I hope that was helpful, guys, and have an awesome day.
Thank you.
Anytime.